First, I'd like to say I can't see anyone, so I'm just speaking to myself in this room. So that would be any awkwardness, I'm just going to put onto that, okay? Or, COVID hiatus, whatever. So yeah, so as Deborah mentioned, I've been working on Cymagic for, I guess you could say I started 12 years ago. How it started for me was I was on a few messaging boards. This is again 12 years ago online, and I happened to read this PDF file on big government conspiracies, all weird and ridiculous stuff, but they did mention this weird science they called cymatics, and a lot of the stuff in that file was based on this fact that you can actually see sounds in a way. So for me, seeing that, it seemed like, okay, maybe it's easy enough to prove or disprove that part, because it was rather mechanical. That kind of launched me into Cymagic, where I started with my own version for a Chladni plate, which I'll show soon what it means. And I've kind of worked with it over the years. I kind of simplified it. It doesn't seem so far away. It doesn't seem so incredible right now today. But I have gotten around with it, and I have tried different ways of making it work, and I'll show you some of them today. So first of all, I'd like to touch a little bit about what sound is. So I know everyone here is probably sound geniuses, but every time I do this talk, there's one thing that people keep hammering, and it's about sound waves. And we've always talked about sound waves I've been in sound tech and in physics. They talk about sound waves, but the truth is that it is a kind of misleading name, because when we say sound waves, we kind of imagine a wave coming out of our mouth. But the truth is that it's not a wave at all. It's more of a bubble. Sound travels 360 degrees in all directions. So I'd like to bring up a schematic of what it looks like. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so basically sound is not a constant, it's a periodic phenomenon. When we talk about, I'm sure some of you already know this, but when we talk about 440 hertz, what we're talking about is a pulse that speed is 440 pulses per second. Okay, so these pulses, they travel out from the source of the sound, and it's a kind of, this is why we see the wave, because it's just a bubble within a bubble within a bubble. This bubble is basically compressed air. So this kind of led me to this world where I thought, okay, but in the air we have incredible decay. Sound doesn't travel that far, and I mean it does travel very far, but it doesn't. The actual vibration doesn't travel. Like, we hear it, but we don't feel it as far. So that kind of brought me into experiments through what can amplify the sound, and this is where we kind of mesh with your topic today, because basically sound vibration travels in water better than travels in air. I'd like to show you our first, what it looks like when sound travels through. I'm sorry. I'd like to show you what it looks like when sound travels through material, and then I'll show you an example of what it looks like when sound travels in water. So what I'm going to show you right now is the first version of my Chladni plate. Chladni plate is basically a metal sheet that spans over a sound source. And when the sheet vibrates, when the sound vibrates the metal, it doesn't vibrate symmetrically. The metal doesn't vibrate. The whole thing doesn't vibrate at the same time because of the passage of the wave. So what you see is different shapes emerging from. I spread the sand over it, and what you can see is shapes emerging. So let me show you this first. Okay, it gets very loud soon. Basically, what you can see is that where there is vibration, sound spills over, and then it kind of collects where there is little to no vibration. This is something that when I saw it for the first time kind of blew my mind, and I really had to get in there. I really had to get my, put my whole weight in there. So I worked with SciMagic with this little plate. I kind of showed it around. It was like a nice, cool thing to show. But I really wanted to build on that. I wanted to try and see different movements of sound. So when I started thinking about water, my first instinct was to try what it looks like in a big container. I felt like maybe the movement of the water would give a better picture. I was right, but not with the size. I'll get to that later. But what I saw was when I used a big container and a big speaker, I saw that the sound really moves. Like you can actually feel the vibration of sounds in water. This led me to think about deaf people who can't hear, that might enjoy feeling sounds, which led me to a collaboration with the Israeli Chamber Music Orchestra. We created a musical show accessible for deaf children. It was a children's show based on the life of Beethoven, and we used SciMagic to demonstrate sound, to let them feel sound, and to give them kind of a taste of how it feels to compose music without being able to hear it. It's been I think 9 years since I officially started going out on stage with SciMagic, and I had my first prototype of the big container and the speaker. It never produced the visuals that I wanted. It wasn't until I saw an online video of a different creator who created the same thing as I did, but with a smaller container. Still didn't have the visuals that I imagined, but I figured, well, if it's smaller and it looks better, it should be really small. So my first prototype, let me show you what it looked like. My first prototype was basically the same speaker, but I had suspended it using springs in order to cancel out vibration. And if you can see the small receptacle in the middle, this is where the sound operates. So this is where we would see the visuals. This is my first prototype. It's 5 generations ago. When I was in Stockholm, 2018, we perfected version 3, And I have beside me the version number 5, which is, let me see if we can, that's what it is. It's basically, there's an amp and a speaker. There's a receptacle. This is 3D printed little amplifier and a water receptacle. And there's just a webcam on top with LED lights. And I just want to experiment a little bit. I'm just gonna change into my webcam. Can you see this? I mean, for me, it's just a little garbled. I hear a yes. Thanks. Okay, so let me put on some frequencies. Let's see what it is. So I'm going to use for now 66 hertz. It's from my experience, it can produce a nice visual. I'm just easing up the volume a little bit. And if I go up and down, so you can see the visuals change. It's almost like every sound, sorry, you see, yeah. Every sound has its own shape. I can spend hours on this, and I have. We can play at it later, take requests. But there's a reason why I showed you this particular instrument right now, because I was trying to figure out how I can tie into the ocean. Obviously, I've been working with water for a long time. But I never really figured out, it's not really about the ocean, but I do have friends who use cymatics in a more, I use it as an art. I have friends who use it as more in a laboratory setting. So this lab in the UK belongs to John Stuart Reid from cymoscope.com. They have recreated the shapes of primitive life forms through sound, through the methods that I've showed you. So on the right here, you see a fossil of a diatom, which is like a seaweed, 200 million years old. And on the left here, you can see just a Chladni plate, right? A round metal plate with sand spread on it and sound that created this shape. There are many different shapes created. This is a trilobite. I think the trilobite has been linked with our first amphibious creatures, like basically the first ones to be able to sustain in the air. Obviously a starfish. What you see here is water. It's basically water and sound. Another fossilized diatom. And this isn't what for me it's, and this is by far the most incredible one I've seen. For me, when I try to think of how sounds interact with water, how frequencies interact with water, it kind of makes me think of the early genetic material floating around in the primordial sea and vibrations turning them into a kind of shapes where they coalesce, what's the word? Connect into a bigger being. This is a kind of idea that I have about how sound and vibrations are incredibly impactful in a watery environment. There's one thing I'd like to show you. So obviously we all know what this is, but knowing what we know on sound and the symmetrical nature of frequencies, I kind of wonder if trees are not just transferring vibration into these little water pods that we later eat as fruit. There's another one. There's another fossilized diatom. What else is there? Okay. So it's not really about what we have today with the ocean. I mean, obviously, we have been doing much more damage than vibration with the ocean. But I have seen a study that used the sounds of a healthy reef, coral reef, and just played it on top, like around a dead coral reef, and soon fish started coming back to the reef because of, I don't know if it's the vibration or, yeah. So that's just something to think about, how sound and vibration actually impacts. It can be a damaging impact and it can be a healing impact, and we have to kind of work with that. For me, what I wanted the rest I wanted to share. So when I discovered that my big idea, the big container of water, was a bust, wasn't visually impressive, it immediately sent me to. I immediately started to think, who can benefit from this? Because it was an incredible sensation, feeling vibrations right onto your skin, and it's not, it feels like you're being electrocuted, but you're not. It struck me that there are people who would really like to hear music but can't. So I used this big container, I called it my tactile music, and I started letting deaf people feel it, and that's kind of where the show is based. And that thing was an incredible success with children. I went around Israel and a few schools in Palestine with musicians, and we played live classical music for children in deaf schools. And we're talking about children who are 3 or 4 years old, sometimes younger, but they immediately get it. They immediately connect to this kind of vibration. And I've seen children who can't hear at all, and they put their hands in the water, and they look at the musicians, and they look at the water, and they kind of, it feels like they're making this connection there. I'd like to show, I know I'm going back and forth, I kind of hate it, but if we were live, then I'd be just clicking through a presentation. But I'd like to show a video of what it sounds like when a child discovers this thing.
We see better how we see and hear.
Every time I see this, I get goosebumps. This child most deaf children today have implants because we can do this now. But there are some children who can't be implanted for many reasons. This this child, as you can see her screaming, she had the implants like very recently, which means that she kept turning them off. Like I've learned that children don't really like the implants and they don't like the sensation of sound bombarding them. So I didn't know if she could hear or not, but her reaction was so, it was just like this pure joy, just feeling this thing. And it's almost like, I feel like almost we're training, it's a kind of musical training when we go around and we play different instruments and we play different tunes and they feel the vibrations, and every note has its own vibration because it's a different kind of, it's a different wavelength. So it's almost like a musical training for people who can't hear music. That's the way I like to think about it. Cymagic has been in kind of hiatus since COVID began. We've had some workshops with special need children, but we haven't had a full-fledged orchestra show. I'm really looking forward for the next one, but this is something that I really need to keep going, because this sensation of children learning about sound and learning about music, even though they can't really hear it, is something that it's been embedded in me. I've even done this show for adults, and one man just came to me and said, "I've never felt a flute," because deaf people have this sensation of music. If they're at a party, or if there's loud music and they can feel the bass in their stomach and they can dance and they can enjoy this, but they lose the higher notes. They lose the more intricate parts of music because the vibration is weaker. The vibration of bass is always stronger. So this kind of project is giving them more definition. It's broadening their spectrum of sound, of hearing. So that's Cymagic. Hopefully the world will get back to where it was and we can start touring again. I'd like to share about the other project that Andrew mentioned before. I know it's not really part of music, tech, or very festive, but I can't really not mention my political agenda. The project we're talking about is called "It's My Problem." It was launched in August of 2020, last year, after a very horrific rape story in Israel, where we just collected. I just felt like there's not enough men in the conversation. The whole gender violence thing has always been women's issues for a lot of men, and it's really not. Since it's really not. So the video featured only men from the Israeli cultural world, celebrities and actors, musicians, and basically what they said was, violence against women is my problem. It was a very viral video. I used a very specific distribution method, where I gave people the original file, and asked them to upload it. It was uploaded over 3,000 times in the first week. It had 2 million views within 24 hours, I guess. We were approached by a company that runs big screens around Israel, and it ran on 23 jumbo screens across the country for 10 days. It was a big success, and then it went worldwide, because in November, a Romanian team recreated the video with their own people, with their own celebrities and actors, musicians, and that video became a message of public interest in Romania. That means it was broadcast for 6 months on all broadcasting networks. Then last June, it was launched again in Brazil, another version, again men, musicians, and this time athletes, and soccer is big in Brazil, and again this whole message of men taking responsibility for gender-based violence. I am mentioning this now because we are working on our second initiative, which will be released again in November. Anyone who wants to join us, you're welcome. It's called, the website is itsmyproblem.org. This time we want to get men to speak with victims, getting to know the stories. So then the next campaign is called Ask Your Mother. And we want to encourage young men and teenagers to ask their mothers about their own stories. So if anyone wants to join, it starts on November 25th. We're using the hashtag #It'sMyProblem and hashtag #AskYourMother. And for any more details, you can contact either me or on our website.
גבר, איפה אנחנו? בוא נדבר שנייה עלינו. כן, על אלימות נגד נשים, אבל עלינו.
תחשוב על מישהי שאתה מכיר או מישהי שיקרה לך.
מישהי מהעבודה, מהשכונה, חברה.
מישהי מהמשפחה.
עכשיו תחשוב שאחת מכל 5 נשים תעבור אונס. נתון בלתי נתפס, אני יודע.
תחשוב שאחת מתוך 3 נשים תחווה תקיפה מינית.
תחשוב שאחת מתוך 1.
כל אחת מהאנשים שחשבת עליהן תוטרד מינית לפחות פעם אחת.
בחייה. נורא, נכון? אז איפה אנחנו?
בוא נדבר עלינו.
שמעתם פעם על המושג מיניות הישגית?
תן בראש.
תביא בה.
זיין, תותח.
מלך.
אתה צריך להזרים,
להשכיב. לזיין.
משדרים לנו כל הזמן שלהיות עם נשים זה כמו מסלול מכשולים. אתה צריך להתגבר על המחסומים.
כל הזמן להסתער קדימה.
היא מזיזה לך את היד?
עזוב, היא משחקת איתך.
למה לא תזמין לה עוד צ'ייסר?
יאללה, תזרים אותה.
רק נשיקה, קטנה. אין אישה שלא נותנת. צריך לדעת איך לקחת.
נשמע מפחיד כשאומרים את זה ביחד, אה?
תחשבו כמה זה מפחיד לצד השני.
כמה פעמים יצא לנו לשמוע גברים מדברים ככה?
בתיכון,
בצבא,
במסיבה.
כמה פעמים הקולות האלה עברו לנו בראש כשהיינו עם מישהי.
כמה פעמים זה הפריע לנו לשמוע אותה.
אבל בואו נדבר עלינו.
כי אנחנו יכולים לשנות את המציאות הזאת.
זה לא חייב להיות ככה.
אלימות נגד נשים היא לא בעיה של נשים.
היא בעיה שלי.
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 שלי. שלי.
שלי.
שלי.
היא בעיה שלי, והיא באחריות כולנו.
itsmyproblem.org. It's one word. It's my problem.
Mordechai, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it. I hope to see you in person at the next MTF event we do. A round of applause, please, for Mordechai Braunstein.